Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Ngarward Sarase, who says, in my state, Queensland, it is not legal for women to obtain an abortion. How can one lay this out to people who claim that because Roe v. Wade is a thing, there is no cause for feminism anymore in the Western world? Well, the first thing you have to do is to convince the person you're talking to that the Western world consists of more than just the United States. And if the person you're talking to is one of my fellow Americans, that might be pretty difficult. But it really is as simple as that. Roe v. Wade is a court ruling in the United States. It is binding only in the United States. And as you point out, there are other places in the Western world where women do not have guaranteed access to abortion, where it is still very much a contentious issue and an issue that threatens the health and the lives of millions of women. So even if you go with Roe v. Wade ended the need for feminism, it doesn't apply to the rest of the Western world. And of course, the argument is bogus anyway, because one, Roe v. Wade is constantly threatened, and it is threatened in the United States perhaps more now than ever, thanks to the incoming Trump administration and the newly reinvigorated, re-empowered far-right faction of our politics. So the right for a woman to have an abortion is by no means guaranteed or safe here in the United States. And even if it were, feminism is about more than guaranteeing women the right to have abortions. That's very important, and it's an issue that definitely deserves attention and deserves support, and it's a right that must be defended. But feminism and women's equality in general consists of more than just protecting access to abortion. So to say that because Roe v. Wade exists, and therefore women in the U.S. have access to abortions, means that therefore there is no need for feminism in the Western world is just patently absurd. And I wonder, why is it that so many folks from outside of the United States seem to argue and appeal to American statutes as though they apply anywhere other than the United States? People who live in places other than the United States use this argument a lot when they talk about free speech. And they might live in countries with very different free speech laws to the United States, but they appeal to this perverted, warped version of free speech that they derive from their misunderstanding of American free speech law as though that applies everywhere. I don't get it. I mean, you're really not doing a very good job of convincing us Americans that we aren't the center of the fucking universe if you base even your bogus, wrong-headed political ideas on our shit. Carlisle the Cinephile. I have a friend who is very vocal on Facebook about physically fighting Trump, his cronies, and his most radical alt-right supporters. And while I wholeheartedly support standing up to these people, I don't feel comfortable wholeheartedly supporting this guy's posts. I just feel like this guy is showing his bravado. He's been talking about becoming a vigilante and is talking like he's Batman. Frankly, I think this guy is, and I loathe this term, virtue signaling. He's pounding his chest to show how much of an ally he is. Am I wrong to feel like my friend's words are just bluster and to not feel comfortable with what he's been saying? What are your thoughts? As is often the case when you ask me these sorts of questions, Carlisle, I agree with you. I mean, the thing about being an ally is that it's not about you. That's sort of part of the definition of being a good ally to another group of people, is that it's not about you. We need to be putting our own ego and our own assumptions and what we think we know aside and being open and listening and communicating with what the people we want to be allies of want us to do and need us to do. And standing around and just yelling about how you're going to kick somebody's ass, that, first of all, not impressive. One of the least impressive things you can do, at least to me, is to talk about how you would kick somebody's ass. Like, that's not... My father raised me to believe that if someone is constantly going on and on and on about how tough they are and how much they could kick somebody's ass, it's probably not a tough person. It's probably not a person who you should be afraid of or impressed by. One of the things my dad has always said about people, you can always tell when my dad doesn't like somebody because he'll say, they don't impress me. And it's usually someone who is just walking around with their chest puffed out, talking about how they're such a badass and they're going to kick this person's ass and this person's ass, and you don't know, if anybody fucks with me, I'll show them, It's not impressive. It's kind of pathetic. You know, if you're that much of a badass, you don't need to broadcast it. Broadcasting it just makes you look small and insecure. And if you're broadcasting it in the name of standing up for some folks in a marginalized group, you're not helping them. You're just making it about yourself. You're just trying to put yourself over using them. And that's the opposite of being an ally. It's a terrible way to go about it. Rebecca Beard. I've been watching the developments at Standing Rock and learning about pipelines and the corruption around them. It's been heartrending, wanting so much to help those standing against these atrocities and being so far away in the UK that all I could do is donate. Then I heard about Susan Sarandon's bank divestment idea, where if your bank invests in shady business practices such as pipelines, arms manufacture, etc., then take your business elsewhere. So is this a good plan? Is divestment something you've done or plan to do? Do you think with Trump taking the reins, the reign of big oil can only be held in check by the combined efforts of the regular people? Oh, I certainly agree with that last part. I think all of us so-called ordinary people definitely need to be the ones who hold Trump accountable, because it seems, at least at the federal level, our elected representatives are not going to do it. Certainly the Republicans are not going to oppose Trump in any significant way, and it seems as though the Democrats, or at least most of the Democrats, have no fight in them either. It's bitterly disappointing, but sadly not all that surprising to see so many congressional Democrats seemingly ready to just roll over and allow Trump and the Republicans to steamroll all of the progress they have made over the last 8 years. So it has to be us. It has to be the ordinary citizens holding Trump and Trumpism in general accountable and resisting it and trying to block it at every turn. As for the divestment idea, I do think it's a good idea. I first heard of it over the summer when Killer Mike said it. Killer Mike said he was on a radio show in Atlanta, and he suggested that black folks take their money out of whatever bank they're in and open accounts at Citizens Trust, which was a historically black-owned bank. And I think, I don't know what practical effect that has had yet. I do remember hearing that like something like $5 million in new accounts were opened at Citizens Trust in the days or weeks following Killer Mike saying that on the radio. So, I mean, it does have an impact. I don't know how big of an impact. I don't know how much money would have to be moved from where to where in order to make a difference on something like a national level to really hurt people who are supporting like the Dakota Access Pipeline or would support some of Trump's policies. I don't know what scale we'd be talking about. I'm completely unqualified to offer expertise on any of this. But in general, yes, I think it's a good idea. Voting with your dollar, I think, is a good idea and has proven to work in the past. And it is something that we should be doing. Now, the tricky part will be finding a bank to put our money in that has relatively clean hands. I guess you just have to sort of find the least crooked place. So maybe that's what we need to do. We need to take our money and put it in the least crooked place that we can find. I definitely think it's a good idea. Malevolent Divinity. Have you ever been annoyed by the sound of your own recorded voice? I find my own voice to be a sort of nails on chalkboard type of thing when it's recorded. Truly the single most disturbing thing one could imagine. It's very off-putting. So is that a thing you've ever experienced? And is there mayhaps a methodology to get over it? I have never had the experience of being repulsed by the sound of my own recorded voice, but it did take some getting used to, and I don't know if there is a methodology to it, but in my case, it was just exposure therapy. It was just, you hear your voice recorded for the first time, and it's like, oh, is that what I sound like? That's not what I thought I sounded like. And then, you know, I mean, now that I've had a YouTube channel for years and years and years now, so I am constantly listening to my own recorded voice by editing these various videos. So it's just, it doesn't sound any different to me now. Like the voice that I hear when I'm talking right now in my ears and the voice that I hear when I listen to my recorded voice, like now, to me, it sounds exactly the same. So I think it's just exposure. I think it's just getting used to the sound of your own voice. There's a visual equivalent to this as well, because we're constantly looking at ourselves in mirrors and we're seeing mirrored images of ourselves, and that becomes our internal self-image. We think that we look like we look in the mirror, and then sometimes when we see ourselves in a photograph or we see ourselves on camera in some way, we're taken aback at first. We're like, wait, is that what I look like? There's something not quite right about how I look. And it's because you're seeing yourself from the outside. You're seeing yourself as others see you. You're not looking at the mirror image. You're not looking at a reversed reflection. You're looking at how you actually appear to other people. And you're not used to that because you're always looking in the mirror. But once you get used to it, again, and that's with me, it's just exposure. It's just, I get used to it. I look at it enough times and I think, oh, okay, yeah, that looks normal to me now. It didn't look normal to me at first, but it looks normal to me now because I've just done it for so long. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's just getting used to hearing what your voice sounds like. But I've never been repulsed by the sound of my own voice, like you say you have of yours. So maybe it'll take a little bit longer for you to get used to it. But that's really the only advice I can give you. Piker Eyes. Hello, Steve. Long time no comment. As you know, I am also a fan of pro wrestling, and I have unsubscribed from the WWE Network as well recently. It is common knowledge that in the business of pro wrestling, you never say never. Does that hold true to fans as well? Do you think you will return to watching the network in the future, perhaps at a point when Trump is no longer in office? Oh, yeah, it's definitely possible. As you say, you never say never in the wrestling business, and I think that does apply to fans as well as to people actually in the business. I'm such a big wrestling fan that I don't think I will be completely done with WWE for the rest of my life, but I do think it'll be a while. Like, maybe not until the end of the Trump administration. I think it's very, very important that we resist accepting and normalizing Trump as much as possible in as many ways as possible at every level, even if it's something as tiny as not patronizing a wrestling company whose ownership supports Trump. I mean, that in the grand scheme of things, that is not a huge deal, but it's just like Rebecca's question earlier dealing with divestment. It's a form of divestment. It's a form of voting with your dollar. If you're going to take my $9.99 a month that I spend on the WWE Network and you're going to give part of it to Donald Trump, then I'm not going to give you that money anymore. You are not going to support a bigoted, unfit demagogue with my money. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, it's going to be a while, but of course, it's definitely going to be longer than this year. You know what I mean? In your unedited question, you mentioned how you might, sneak back in to watch WrestleMania or the Rumble or something. I'm definitely out for all of that. I'm not going to watch the Rumble next month. I'm not going to watch WrestleMania. I'm out. But in a few years, hopefully just a few years, when Trump is no longer in office and I've had some time to cool off, maybe Vince and Linda have had some time to think about what they've done. Like, that's ever going to happen. Like, Vince McMahon has a fucking conscience. That's never going to happen. But yeah, I might resubscribe in a few years. But in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy some Japanese wrestling and some independent wrestling and some Lucha Underground and some Ring of Honor and some stuff, all kinds of great non-WWE wrestling that I haven't had time to pay attention to because WWE has been taking up all the space in the room. So I'm actually looking forward to that. Patrick Dodds. Steve, this is kind of a tall advice-asking question, so I hope you'll bear with me. For the last 5 years, I've been building my life after 18 to 20 years of serious mental health problems after finally having found the proper medications. I've been able to physically rehabilitate myself. I've lost 170 pounds, for example, but the realm of social and cognitive health still give me some problems. So, what, in your estimation, is the best way to socially branch out? This is a skill I should have learned in middle school onward, but as mentioned, I was not in a good space at that time. Do you have any tips? And in terms of cognition, how do you keep your mind as sharp as you do? And if it's not pushing it, can I get a secular amen? This week marks my 5-year anniversary of being consistently stable. Amen and hallelujah. Absolutely. Congratulations, Patrick. That is always wonderful news when someone who has dealt with struggles is able to master those struggles, or at least get a little bit of a hold on them. I think that's wonderful. And I mean, how do you socially branch out? You're asking the wrong guy. I mean, if there's something that you are really interested in and you can find like a class you can take, like a writing class or a videography class or an art class or something that that puts you in contact with other people who you already have something in common with because they're taking the same class as you. I mean, like a film class. If there's like a community college that offers like film courses or something. Something like that. Something that puts you in proximity to other people with a similar interest and facilitates discussion. So, you can take part in the class and people can get to know you through that. And then maybe you can talk to people, during a break or before and after class. Like it's a foot in the door. It's a nice, easy, low pressure way of putting yourself in a social situation to facilitate getting to know people and people getting to know you. That's about the best I can do. 1511 Enterprises. A question. Do you find It's a Wonderful Life to be a heartwarming, uplifting slice of festive season cheer? Or do you, like me, find it kind of dark and depressing? Also, is it just me, or is some of the editing in the film amazingly bad? I can't think of specific examples because I've only seen it once, and that was 5 years ago, but I remember being stunned by some of the jump cutting and continuity errors in it. Wasn't expecting that sort of thing from a major Hollywood production of that vintage. If you want to know what I think about It's a Wonderful Life, you're going to have to listen to this week's Late Seating podcast, pal. I'm not going to give it away here for nothing. No, I'll tell you. I think it's both, actually. I think It's a Wonderful Life is a dark, depressing movie, but it is also an uplifting movie. And I think it has to be one in order to be the other. First, you get George's sort of slow, excruciating downward spiral, and then when he finally hits rock bottom, you have his moment of despair, and then his realization, and his climb back up. And I think you have to have the first to have the second. It has to be depressing first so it can be heartwarming later. And I think it's both. And as for the editing, yeah, there are some odd, sort of awkward jump cuts, aren't there, that I never really noticed before, where Capra will cut from a shot to the same shot, and it's a visible jump cut. And I wonder what the purpose of that was. I can't discern any artistic purpose to that. There may be. I'm not saying that there definitely wasn't an artistic purpose, but it eluded me if there is. And it feels like more just like an editing thing, just like, well, they had to cut to a different take, but they didn't have a different angle, so they just did a jump cut. And yeah, it does feel a little awkward, and it does seem strange that a director as meticulous as Capra, and when you watch that movie, you can see how carefully composed so many of those shots are. The scenes are so perfectly composed. That it seems odd that a director with that kind of an eye and that kind of attention to detail would be satisfied just doing a jump cut, to get to another take. But so maybe it was just practical. Maybe he just didn't have another angle, and he had no choice. I don't know. But yeah, I noticed that too. I definitely noticed that too. You know what else I noticed? I noticed this just now, actually, when I heard that odd, strange, slightly off-putting noise. I noticed that it's time for the end of this part of the video, and it's time for the next part, which is a little something I like to call
the lightning round.
BCS 1982. How many people in human history had a better run than John Glenn? Not many. I mean, if Christianity was true, then you could make a case for Jesus because he got nailed to a cross, which sucked, but then after that he got to come back and become ruler of the universe. That's a pretty good run. But assuming that that is not actually true, Glenn's got to be right there at the top. Conference report. Question. Would you ever consider practicing a religion, i.e. engaging in rituals, following moral principles, attending gatherings, etc., without the attendant belief in its mythology, if you felt it improved your life or made you a better person? Sure, I think that something like that is certainly plausible. I mean, I don't feel a need for that sort of thing now, but I wouldn't rule it out, and I don't think that people who do that are necessarily doing anything bad or anything wrong. Lucas Hackett, One Angry Brony. I apologize if I'm late, but I'm going to make us a sandwich. What do you want on it? There are some Tofurkey deli slices in the fridge. Roast beef, please. And just toasted white bread and a couple of slices of Swiss cheese and lettuce and mayo and a couple of pickles. That's all I need. And there's some chips too, maybe just a handful of chips on the side. Thanks. Step back history. Okay, so I have a holiday question for next week. I'm a Canadian who grew up in a completely non-religious household. Christmas has always just been secular to me. However, next week I'm going for the first time to my American, Christian, Republican, Midwestern in-laws for the holiday. Can I get a mini survival guide of what I should know about? I have literally never been to church or prayed or anything. I assume you do not have an invisibility cloak. Assuming that you do not. I would avoid doing anything that singles you out or draws attention to you. When people pray, just bow your head and just sit silently until they're done. If you're in church and everybody stands, stand up with them. You know, if everybody sings, just stand there. And if you know the song and you feel like singing, you can sing along. If not, just, do whatever they do and just avoid standing out and drawing attention to yourself. And you should be fine. I have religious in-laws and we get along great. And whenever they do something religious when I'm around, I just clasp my hands and lower my head and wait respectfully for it to be over. And it served me well. So maybe try that. Good luck. Vitamin W. On the Late Seating Podcast review of Wizard of Oz, you do a voice of a German nihilist version where Dorothy is hit in the head and dies. You said the film would be 12 minutes long. Was that Hans Krieger's voice? It probably was. I think it was intended to be Werner Herzog's voice, but, I ain't exactly Mel Blanc over here. There's only so many voices. So, yeah, it probably was Hans Krieger's voice, whether I intended it to be or not. Captain Andy, hey Steve, what's your opinion on the great Die Hard debate? Does it or does it not count as a Christmas movie? Well, it's a movie set during Christmas. It takes place partially during a Christmas party, and lots of people enjoy watching it during Christmas. So I'm going to say that it does count as a Christmas movie. Kevin Logan, want to engage in some good old badinage? Oh, Kevin, not in front of everybody. God. Later. Privately. Okay? We can just PM me. We'll badinage. Just, Yes. Ragnar the Red. Hey, Steve, quick question for you. It's a serious question. I'm not trying to troll or insult you. I understand blocking rude and inflammatory people, but why block people who just want to respectfully disagree with you and have a conversation? Wouldn't it be more productive to engage with the people who are capable of having a meaningful exchange of ideas? Well, the problem is sorting those people out from the trolls. Also, I don't think tweeting at someone out of nowhere, I disagree with you on such and such a thing, is a good way to start a conversation. Like if we've never interacted before, and the first words I hear from you out of the blue are a social media message where you say, I disagree with you about feminism. Okay. I don't give a shit. Dylan Jones, was there ever a time after you started to become skeptical of religion that you felt guilty for not believing or fearful about eternal damnation? No, I can honestly say that even in the years in my life when I was desperately trying to be religious and trying to believe, fear of hell was never something I experienced. I never felt the slightest bit nervous or afraid about eternal damnation. And I think that's one of the things that I sort of point to as evidence that I never really believed, because I was never afraid of hell. I was always far more afraid of dying and being annihilated than of suffering in hell. I was never afraid of hell the least little bit. Emily Short, okay, my last time here was a bit of a downer, you think? So I'll ask you a question that's happier. I note that you have an emphasis on US, UK, Canada movies, but what about foreign films? I have my favorites, but I'm interested in what another cinephile thinks. Well, my taste in foreign films is a lot like my taste in English language films, which is to say I like a lot of good stuff, but my taste isn't terribly adventurous. My taste in foreign cinema tends to clump around certain directors or certain movements, right? Like I love the French New Wave, so I'm a big fan of Francois Truffaut. I love the 400 Blows. I love Jules and Jim. I love Robert Bresson and Diary of a Country Priest and Balthazar. Going beyond the New Wave, I love Ingmar Bergman, The Seventh Seal. Like, how do you not love that? some Japanese cinema like Otsu and Tokyo Story is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. Kurosawa, of course, and Ikiru and Seven Samurai and Rashomon. The Lives of Others, which was just a beautiful movie about 10 years ago. One of the best movies I've seen in a very, very long time. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Let the Right One In, amazing. Downfall, which was great even before it became a meme. So yeah, I mean, I love a lot of foreign language films. It's just that my knowledge of them and my exposure to them is fairly broad, but also fairly shallow. So I don't have a terribly sophisticated palate, but there are definitely many, many foreign language films that I know and that I love very, very much, a few of which I have just named. So thanks for the question. Thanks for all of the questions. That's it for the questions. I'm done answering questions for this week. Before I go, I want to end the video, as I always do, with a shout out, and the shout out this week goes to Anti-Social Media. And the channel description of Anti-Social Media describes it as a podcast and YouTube channel focusing on the worst type of online activities, from unnecessary outrage, trial by social media, trolling, stalking, etc. And Anti-Social Media, he also recently gained a bit of exposure in the atheist secular community on YouTube for making a series of videos mocking and ridiculing some of the worst, most toxic professional trolls and abusers and harassers and inciters of harassment on YouTube, especially in atheist circles, the anti-SJW types that probably shouldn't even have YouTube channels. They've grossly violated community guidelines over and over again. But as long as they're here, I suppose we can at least have a laugh at their expense once in a while. And Anti-Social Media has done a wonderful job of doing that sort of thing recently, so I'm a big fan of his work. He seems like a nice dude. I don't know him that well, but he seems like a good dude. And he's someone who, until recently, I had blocked on Twitter. Obviously, that was unnecessary. I have since corrected that mistake. He is unblocked, and he has just received a shout-out. It's a Christmas miracle. Isn't it wonderful? What more could you possibly ask for from the holidays? Well, actually, I'm hoping that you could ask for at least a little bit more in the form of some excellent podcasts, particularly the Let Me Listen podcasts, which are a series of podcasts created by my pal Jason Harding, a.k.a. Jason with a D, the puppet master of Opinionville. He is the creator of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts, which includes Let Me Finish, which Jason co-hosts with Finite Atticus, Filmtastic Voyage, which is hosted by Mike and Alex, Cinetific, which is hosted by Professor Jason and Professor Aaron, American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, the hilarious improv comedy podcast, and last but not least, because it's the one that I'm in, Late Seating, the movie review podcast co-hosted by Jason and myself, where we take a classic film, we watch it, we give it a fresh review, we make fun of it, and we decide whether or not it deserves its reputation, whether that reputation is good or bad. And for Christmas, for our Christmas episode dropping today, you can hear a very special edition of Late Seating, where we do a live commentary for It's a Wonderful Life. So, you get your copy of It's a Wonderful Life. You get our podcast. You play our podcast. And when we tell you to, you hit play on your copy of It's a Wonderful Life, and you listen to us talk over the movie while you watch the movie. It'll be great. It's like Riff Tracks. We didn't invent it. It's like Riff Tracks. Probably not as funny. But we're going to try. We're going to try to make it funny and insightful and worth hearing. And actually, it was a lot of fun to record. It came out really well when we were recording it. I think it'll be great. You can listen to our special It's a Wonderful Life Christmas episode of Late Seating. You can listen to all of the past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the excellent Let Me Listen podcasts by going to letmelistenpodcasts.com. That is it for me, everybody. I am out of here. This is my last video that will go up before Christmas, so I just want to say to everyone watching who celebrates Christmas, I hope that you all have a wonderful, happy Christmas. Whatever holidays you may be celebrating this week, next week, at the end of the year, I hope that you all have a wonderful, happy holiday. I appreciate you watching and supporting this channel in all of the different ways that you do so much. And of course, specifically for this series, I thank you so much for your questions. Please do leave a comment in the comment section of this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody, and happy holidays. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.